As a reporter for Post-Industrial Media and the host of the podcast Extremely American. His podcast looks at how far-right groups are trying to change the U.S. government. And Heath, thanks for being with us tonight. You have reported on a number of these far-right groups for National Public Radio, the BBC. How are these groups weaponizing topics like the Great Replacement Theory to carry out their message?
I mean, it's really kind of crept into the broader culture war issues. And a lot of times the language is sort of, couched in a way where, you might have some sort of plausible deniability. I think we saw a little bit of that with Tucker Carlson just a few minutes ago in that clip you showed. The sort of, we're not racist, but we're worried about this. But it does ultimately come from that sort of really dark place where people are talking about basically playing on fears of white Americans that, they're going to be a minority and that they're going to lose power. So I think you're seeing that kind of, it's kind of merging with different debates about critical race theory, which has become a really huge topic for far-right groups. You'll even see militia groups talking about critical race theory and sort of trying to get involved in school board politics. So it's all kind of coming together under that umbrella of things that are making some Americans, especially white Americans, uncomfortable with changes that are happening in the country.
Heath, here's the problem. These theories don't survive the light of day. If you take Elise Stefanik's argument, for instance, that they're trying to bring in 11 million people, that assumes that the 11 million people coming into the United States are all going to vote Democratic, that they're all going to say, we don't want Republicans. And the easiest way for Republicans to fight back is not with a gun. It's actually with a better idea, which is what former President George W. Bush, H.W. Bush, and Ronald Reagan even argued. So these arguments for things like the Great Replacement Theory, they belie the nation's history of being a nation of immigrants.
Right, and in a way, it's sort of it's almost a sort of a self, almost like an own goal for certain Republicans, I'd say, because it almost says that their party is only going to appeal to white people when they say that, and I would think that especially more moderate Republicans would not want their party to be a party based on that, and certainly would want to reach out to people of different races. And as I think almost everybody knows, your race does not determine how you vote. There might be certain patterns, but nobody, no ethnicity, no race, no religion is a monolith, and people vote their conscience. And yes, ideally this would be these would be politics that where the best ideas win. I would say the politics in this country are kind of getting away from ideas at the moment, though.
Heath, here's the part that Americans don't understand. We have the First Amendment, and it says that we have the freedom of speech. I'm a broadcaster. I can't say the things that these people put on the internet. So how do you separate what is free speech and what is going into a theater and yelling fire? And why is it possible to go on the internet and scream fire?
I mean, I think that's a question that a lot of people are grappling with right now. I think that there's a real debate going on about where that line is between the First Amendment, between free speech and incitement. I think it gets even muddier when we're talking about the internet, because obviously a lot of the social media spaces, all the social media spaces are controlled by private companies, and the First Amendment obviously is about government controlling speech. So it all gets very murky. I think it might even get murkier when we start talking about civil court proceedings. If people start suing based on this, as opposed to trying to bring criminal proceedings, then I think you might see potentially some consequences of some of the speech that some would say has led to violence.
Heath, how slippery is the slope? In the past, if we were talking about groups like Al-Qaeda or ISIS, for instance, we would be talking about groups. In this case, we're talking about 389 million firearms in the United States, and any of those people with all of those guns can decide to do what this shooter did in Buffalo. How do you police a population that is so heavily armed?
Well, I think that's something that the U.S. has been grappling with for decades. I mean, yes. I mean, the fact is that our peers in Europe that have much stricter gun rules and many fewer guns in civilian hands, simply have lower murder rates, and they have very little gun violence. We have decided that gun rights are important, and Americans like guns. All right, as you said, there's more guns than Americans right now. So I think that's something where you can't unring the bell. The guns are out there, and I think that's a really tricky political calculation that people are making right now. And frankly, I think a lot of that has to happen at the state and local level, because we're such a decentralized government, and gun rules really vary from state to state. I'm in Idaho, and there's almost no rules, but my parents are in California, where it's very, tricky to own a gun. So it's a mix.
It's a mess. Heath Druzin is a reporter for the Post-Industrial Media. He's also the host of the podcast Extremely American. Heath, as always, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much.